board workshop of the Board of Trustees of the McAllen Independent School District will be held Thursday, June 18th, 2026, beginning at 5:30 p.m. Dr. Ricardo Chapa Boardroom, Administration Building of the McAllen Independent School District, 2000 North 23rd Street, McAllen, Texas, 78501. Items listed on this agenda may be taken in an order other than as shown on this agenda. Unless removed from the consent agenda, items identified within the consent agenda will be acted on at one time. At this meeting, there may be discussion and action by the board on the items and subjects listed as follows. Number 1, call meeting to order. I did so at 5:31. Number 2, public comments. We have no public comments for this evening. Item number 3, discussion of bond project management and construction by Eichelbaum, Wardell, Hansen, Powell, and Munoz, PC. Dr. Gutierrez.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice President, Trustee Vice President, Mr. Carrion, and Board of Trustees. The voters in McAllen ISD approved the district's $335 million bond program in May 2nd. Tonight, we're bringing forward a presentation by Mr. David Hansen, who is an attorney for Eichelbaum, Wardell, Hansen, Powell, and Munoz, to review with the Board of Trustees the role of a bond project manager and the procurement of construction services to include professional services. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. David Hansen. He has a PowerPoint and to go over the project manager and for our bond project. So, Mr. Hansen, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, good evening. I hope everybody can hear me. I know I've got the microphone, but if you have trouble hearing me, just let me know, okay? All right, so we're going to talk about construction manager agent, and it's a method of delivery. That's terminology that comes out of the Texas Government Code for managing a construction project. We'll talk a little bit about the foundations of what the statute requires, and then just practically what kind of duties you can expect of a construction manager agent if you decide to hire them. Let's get started. I'm David Hansen. I've been practicing in construction procurement for about, I guess, 24 years now, something like that. So, and I've been at that firm the whole time. I've been a lawyer. So, all right. So, any other questions about that? Just feel free to ask. Well, let's start talking about construction manager agency, okay? So, the construction manager agent, let's see. Uh-oh. We got this. What is it? Okay. What do they do? And how do we hire one? So we'll talk about all of those things today in different levels of detail. And you see there's a lot of slides there. The last few slides, I'll just tell you, are on the other kinds of procurement methods, because eventually you're going to have to pick one of those to get your builder, because that's the first thing we know, is that a construction manager agent or a project manager isn't allowed to build anything. They're not allowed to sign a contract or a subcontract or pick up a hammer, nothing like that. So they are an advisor, strictly an advisor, okay? All right. So the best way to go slow is to try to go fast, okay? So it's going to happen that you're going to have some things that you've got this bond passed, and you've got projects that you want to get done. The community is going to be wanting to get certain things done. And probably the worst thing that can happen is that you try to go too fast. You try to cut around some of the legal requirements, because in almost every instance, that's just going to put you back and make things go slower. So don't skip any steps. I'm sure your procurement folks will take care of that. So how do we hire, or what are we supposed to do for every project? And this is the order in which you do it. You get your in the construction manager agent, you always have to get your design professional for a project first before you sign the construction manager agent or project manager up for that particular project. And I'll talk about how to work around that. But then you hire your construction manager agent during the design phase, okay? And we'll talk about what some of their duties are later on in the presentation, but you're going to see they play a pretty important role if you decide to go that route in doing cost estimates for you, in analyzing your labor markets, analyzing your material markets, to make sure that you are value engineering your project as it's being designed, okay? Then, after that, you'll hire either a general contractor through a competitive seal proposal, which will then result in you getting your school. Or you could hire a design build firm, which would, could design anything for you. Maybe, we oftentimes think about a design build project as maybe a metal building, something for which there's already a plan that exists. Maybe you're going to buy a building like that, or a metal building, and but you can use it for other things. I just use that for example, that ag barn there. Or you can get for your smaller jobs, you get your trade contractor, okay, and maybe they're going to do some small project for you. But it always has to go in that order. If you're doing it in any other order, you're doing it wrong, okay? So bottom line is, before you hire, the very first thing you have to do is get your design professional, architect or engineer, for your project, okay? What is a construction manager agent, okay? So quite simply, the construction manager agent is an advisor, right? In fact, when you look at the contracts, that's what it talks about. If you sign our usual AIA contract, it's called a construction manager advisor. And so in the law, though, more importantly, there's some specific prohibitions on what an agent can do, and one of those, like I said, is building stuff. So when you're thinking about hiring a project manager or an agent, don't think of them as your general contractor, okay? Don't think of them as the person that if the project starts to go wrong, that they are going to be responsible for the defect. They're supposed to report to you so that you can use the contractual mechanisms that you have and levers to be able to solve your problems. And they'll be there. You just have to be willing willing and capable of doing that. And that's one of the things that a good project manager or CM agent can do, is know your contracts and know the mechanisms by which you can address problems early, before they get big, okay? All right. So what's a construction manager agent? So they provide, in the statute it says they provide consultation or administrative services during the design and construction phase to help manage multiple contracts with various construction prime contractors. So you're thinking back to our example, it's like you might have one general contractor working on one project and another working on another project. You could have a lot of different kinds of delivery methods going on for different projects, but that would be their job, is to sort of manage those. And really, we think of during the construction phase, what they're doing is they are keeping track of the money, they are processing pay applications, they're doing all that sort of thing, okay? All right.
So if they're keeping track of the money and processing pays, where's the district coming in that respect?
Okay, so what they're doing, that is a support role for the district. So we don't ever delegate out, our checkbook, right? But what they do is that there'll be a process that whenever let's say you're building an elementary school, the contractor is going to ask for progress payments. So as they do some work, then they're going to submit a pay application to the architect. And the architect is going to review it and look and see, if it's appropriate for the work that's been done. If you have a project manager, there's another layer where they will actually take a look at the pay application too. And then if it's approved, then they'll certify that. And then they send that to the district, and then the district would process it. It sounds simple, but when you have dozens of projects going off simultaneously, it is one way to kind of think of it as sort of like augmenting your staff administratively speaking, so that they can help with a lot of that paperwork. And also, a lot of times the school districts don't have the construction sort of infrastructure to sort of track like the flow of money, the anticipated costs that are going to be coming up, you know, and your expenditures against your bond funds and that sort of thing. So really what we're thinking of is a construction manager agent is more of an accountant than a builder, right? So sometimes they will, you know, have and provide project on-site representation, but that's a whole other thing. But their main function is to help you in the pre-construction or the design phase, to help you to go ahead and design an efficient project, right, using their cost estimating. And we will get to some of those duties, but it is not to build anything. It's not to actually pick up a hammer. They're actually prohibited by law from doing that. Okay. All right. So a construction manager agent provides consultation, administrative services. The reason I have this slide in here is that it looks like a duplicate, and it kind of is, except that you're going to have people come to you and tell you, oh, no, we're not a construction manager agent. I'm a project manager, right? I'll show you why. I'll give you the tool to respond to that in just a moment. But if you look at it, really a construction manager agent provides consultation or administrative services during design construction. That's also what a project manager does. Why is that important? Well, it's important because it governs how we go about hiring them. Because whenever we have a contract that is construction services, which is what they are, even though they're not building anything, they're advising on construction. We have to make that procurement through a provision of the government code, and I'll run you through it real quickly in the next few minutes. But we just need to know that if somebody says, no, we're a project manager, not a construction manager agent, you just need to know they're basically, it's the same thing. It's like those old, Twix commercials where it's, we're as different as a cemetery and a graveyard. They're the same thing. Okay. All right. Oops. Wow. Okay. So why construction services? Holy mulligan. Okay. Well, so anyhow. So what we need to know is construction services. Anytime you're going to modify a facility, right? There's a provision of the education code that's 44.031 of the Ed Code, and that provision says that if it's construction services, you have to procure that service in a method that's allowed under the government code. So that's why we're here. So, and it's going to be more than $100,000 for this type of service. Okay. All right. All right. So the different kinds of delivery methods that are available to you, competitive bidding, which you might use for tiny projects for different reasons we won't go into here. Competitive sealed proposals, that's how you're usually going to get your general contractor for your bigger projects. Then construction manager agent is a delivery method in 2269. It's different from construction manager at risk, right? Which is they are actual builders of your project. They start early and they participate in the design process, but then when it comes time to build, they are the actual builders. So agent and at risk are very different. Okay. Then you have design build. That's one where it's a firm that designs, or that has, it's one firm that designs the project and constructs the project, right? So just like it sounds. And so there'll be some engineers on their staff there and builders too. And then finally, job order contracts. That's the last delivery method. And that's what you use for doing, the kind of repairs that pop up from time to time.
So
Okay.
the difference between design build and construction manager at risk is that design builds are one firm, construction managers may hire others, or what's the difference?
Yeah, so a construction manager at risk. So design build is one where the process for hiring one of them is different than a construction manager at risk, but really what it comes down to is that a construction manager at risk, while they participate in the development of the design, they are not designers. They're not qualified to do a design, right? You have an architect for that. Whereas a design builder, they have their own designer, they have their own contractor, but a key point to remember, since we won't get there, is that you just need to know for design build, in order to get one, you need to have an architect who will help you to solicit a design builder. So it's not the case that we can just hire a design builder without having an architect. Sometimes people think, well, design build, no architect, but actually you get two. One that is responsible to you, and then one from within that firm.
I have another question on
sir.
this prior slide. So of the procurement methods,
Can you go back to the slide?
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah.
There's a list of the projects, the other one?
I would imagine that depending on the project, some of these are going to be better suited for maximum value creation for the district and for the taxpayer. What I would like to see from the administration is for each of the projects that we have a very clearly articulated memo that outlines which procurement method we're going to use, why we choose that method over any other method, how we will structure the bid process in order to maximize value for the taxpayers, what potential risks there are at the very start of the project and how we plan to mitigate those risks, and a clearly defined roles and responsibilities for the district, the architect, the construction manager agent, if we have one in that place, or any other contracting entity for that particular project. So if we count up all of the projects that we have in the bond, 30 or so, I think it is, that'd be essentially 30 memos that I would like to see before we sort of start putting things out into the public and calling for bids and things of that nature.
Which is, so since you bring that up, so for every project where you're going to do, if you decide to do a project manager that's going to have responsibilities for a project, there will be a selection of that delivery method for those, but then a subsequent or a second delivery method selection to get the actual person that's going to build the facility. So and they are very different. I don't know that there's a cheaper method, but there are definitely features about each method that are going to be, that really identify themselves with specific kinds of projects. So,
Yep.
So very good.
Thank you.
Can I ask Mr. Trevino, Ruben, when the last building that we built was UTRGV Collegiate Campus, what method of those did we utilize to build the UTRGV Collegiate Campus?
For the collegiate UTRGV campus, we decided to go with design build. At that time, we had time constraints. The university and the district already knew what building was going to be built, which was a prototype. And the fastest and most cost-effective delivery method to get us there where we needed to be on time and in budget was the design build, and that's what we chose to go with.
Okay.
And just to be clear, we already had the plans that were built by an architect because it was a
Correct.
prototype.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's why we went with design build?
Correct.
Okay, but which is the most common one of those?
The most common one is going to be competitive seal proposals. That's the one that people just generally feel the most comfortable with because it is that you design it and then you put it out on the street for competition. And all the contractors, it's a big, they compete and you can negotiate. That's the thing with competitive seal proposals that's different from competitive bidding, is that after you get the proposals in, you can negotiate the scope and the price. And that's why if you ever pick competitive seal proposals for a delivery method, make sure you make qualifications the #1 requirement, because even though you may have somebody who comes in with a cheaper bid later on, you can always, if you can't reach a deal with the best qualified one, you end that negotiation, you move on to the next one. So you can always get to the cheapest, right? So always make qualifications the most important part. But competitive seal proposals, that's how most people do it. Construction manager at risk is popular in certain parts of the state, but there's a lot more people who try to do it than actually are qualified to do it. It is a very specialized kind of type of work where you're half accountant and half builder. And you might be a great contractor, but if you don't have that sort of money management part down, if you don't understand your role in the design development, you're going to struggle with a construction manager at risk. And that's a lot of the big stories that you see around the state about overpayment, et cetera. They stem from construction management at risk because of misunderstanding by the construction manager about how they're compensated versus in a competitive suit proposal. Sorry. All right. Okay. So what are they supposed to do? What's a CM agent supposed to do? In the law, there are, the contract is going to govern that, right? But there are some things that they're supposed to do under the law. And we talked a little bit about them earlier. It's this consultation or administrative services, right, during the design and construction phase. So the consultation, I'll get into more details on what kind of consultation they do in each phase. Okay. All right. So they serve as the agent for that's the agent for the governmental entity. So right there is a risk, right? So whenever you hire a construction manager agent, you need to make sure that it's real clear what the limits of their agency are, right? And so you do that in their contract, and you may even do it by motion at some point in time at the board, because there's a lot of disputes that happen because somebody says, or some contractor says, your agent said I was going to get paid for this, even though there was no change order to support it that had been approved. So having an agent brings with it some risk, which can be mitigated so long as you're really clear about the limits of that agency, right?
Question on that.
Yes, sir.
What is your recommendation for the interface between a construction manager agent and the district administration? Who is the primary reporting line go to, and who are the members of the team that meet with the construction manager agent on a regular basis?
So it's going to be, generally speaking, it depends on the size of your district, but a district this size, you would, at certain times, they're going to meet, with superintendent, assistant superintendent, deputy superintendent, and certainly people who have a role in managing the construction from a operational standpoint here. Yep. So it might be your operations person, or sometimes maintenance as well. Because one of the reasons why a district your size might have an agent working for them is that you've got some scheduling things. You've got to move people around. You're going to have facilities that are down for a little bit, especially if you're doing renovations and that sort of thing. So that's one of the functions that they would perform, is some scheduling. So there may be times where that agent would meet with even a campus principal to find out, along with the team, to find out what the obstacles might be if you're going to renovate that building, right? And so it's somewhat fluid, right?
Thank you.
But they have a responsibility to do that, just to be clear. Sometimes, it's going to be in their contract. They are going to have a responsibility to meet with every necessary person at the school.
Great,
okay?
thank you.
So they need to be a limited agent, okay, in terms of money, and you prescribe the limits of their authority in the contract, okay? All right. So the contract between the district and the construction manager agent is going to have, they can provide administrative personnel, of course, because that might be people who are helping to process pay applications, helping to do scheduling, that sort of thing, right? So there's some equipment that might be necessary for them to perform their duties. They can't provide, materials and labor for the job, but sometimes they might even have a job site trailer if you opt to have them provide some on-site representation, okay? Sometimes they do on-site management. Some projects need it more than others. A lot of little tiny districts, if they use this delivery method, they might need to have somebody from an agent firm out there because they don't have anybody they can spare, right? Or anybody with the skill or qualifications. A district this size, sometimes you will have personnel that is on staff to, you know, to be there and manage, and but really that's one of the things that they are allowed to provide, okay? And then any other services in the contract. And I'll tell you what some of those are in a moment, okay? All right. So, so the agent is not allowed to self-perform any of the work, okay? They can't be a party to a subcontract, okay? And we can't require them to provide payment and performance bonds, naturally, because they are not builders. And I just can't emphasize that enough. I've been to trial in a case involving CM agent, and where it didn't go well, and the board members, to the time they were sitting on the stand, referred to the CM agent as their general contractor, because they really thought that they were the ones responsible for it. So you won't think that because we're talking about it today, but they didn't learn that in time. So that's why I want to emphasize that. They are not the builders, even if they show up in flannel and jeans every day. They're not the builders, okay? All right. All right, so the other interesting thing about the CM agent is that they represent you in a fiduciary capacity. So they have the highest level of responsibility to you. And it's not like, there's a fiduciary capacity is like your banker, your accountant, your lawyer. They owe you a duty to put your interests ahead of their own. And that's necessary in part because you are going to be relying to some degree on their recommendations about maybe building systems you might use, or maybe the scope of your project, right? You're relying on them for that. And so the decisions you make based upon their advice might have the effect of increasing their compensation, right? Because if their compensation is based upon the budget for the project, and you say, yeah, go ahead. So just know that they are, by statute, they are a fiduciary to you. So they're supposed to put your interests ahead of their own. So there is no ask that is too great of them, okay? If you hire one of them, you have the right to expect of them everything you would expect from a lawyer, your banker, your accountant. So it's important to know that, okay? So they're supposed to help you in both the design phase and the construction phase. It's referenced in the statute, and then there's some specific kinds of duties that are really common in the contracts, okay? So going now to stepping away from what's in the law, going to what's in the standard kinds of contracts that you have. These are the initial pre-construction services. So let's say you hired an architect, you've got your project roughly defined, and you bring the CM agent in now, and they're going to look at it and see what you've got, okay? Now, one thing you need to know is that you've gotten cost estimates from your architects, right? And this is not a slight to architects, but an architect doesn't have the highest level of their level of care in doing cost estimating for you has a pretty wide range. I've been in cases where the experts say, 20% high or 20% low, right? And that's pretty wide. A CM agent or a construction manager at risk, if you use that, they have to have a much clearer idea of what your cost estimating, or what your costs are going to be for your project. So think of them as a contractor that doesn't build anything, right? So they're supposed to really be good at cost estimating. And that's one of the things that they'll do in their initial responsibilities for you. The other thing is going to be scheduling, okay? So when you get if you get a project manager and they're assigned to a project, they're supposed to spit out a schedule, right, that has a lot of the really important dates on there. I'll get in more detail in just, or the milestones, rather. I'll talk about those a little bit more in just a second, right? So, but they're supposed to, just like an architect does, they're supposed to evaluate your program. So you probably have a program for your elementary or high school or whatever you're going to build. and here's just basically what you want to do, okay? You know. And so they're gonna evaluate it. And they're gonna say, wow, you're really, really off here, right? Or you're right on the money here. But they're going to give you sort of an initial analysis of your project. That's what they're supposed to do if you're using the standard types of agreements, right? And tell you if you need to think about adjusting your budget up or adjusting it down. And that's like basically their first job when they get on there, right? Because if there is no connection between your budget and the project, they need to tell you right away. So you don't start down a road that's gonna get you this big surprise when it comes time to bid it out, right? You gotta start adjusting your scope early.
Yeah.
Okay?
Mr. Hanson,
Yes, sir.
what have you seen other boards do that effectively creates stage gates all along this process with, if the first is indeed we hire a construction manager agent and then they revise the budget, what comes after that, and how do boards formalize
I'm glad you
that
asked.
process?
I'm glad you asked, because
Great.
actually it's a great segue, because in the standard contracts, before you start the next phase of design, the board is supposed to receive and approve the budget that's been presented, okay? And so as the design progresses, the budget needs to get more and more specific, and the design gets more and more specific. So you should plan on that. I mean, that's, when I've seen district be real successful with managing their projects, it has been through that level of hands-on sort of interaction with the architects and the contractors to really require them to come up and make their presentation, not to use your staff to do that, but to really have them stand here and tell you that, and then you vote. You either approve it, or you say, nope, go back to the drawing board, we like the design, but you need to go back and bring it back within budget, okay? So that's your prerogative, you get to do that. And that's when you'll have success. Too often, what you see happen is you'll have administrators who are, because sometimes districts will have a philosophy, they don't want to throw the contractor or the architect under the bus in front of the board, right? Don't do that. They're getting paid a lot of money, right? So they should come there and they should explain themselves to you. Because what happens if you've got problems that pop up, eventually you're going to start to associate your administrator with the problem, and that's what I call making them the avatar of incompetence, right? So every time something bad happens, they come up here to tell you the bad thing happened, you ask questions and they can't answer them. So definitely think in terms of having contractors or architects making presentations to you about the status of their project, okay? Particularly when it comes time to approving the next steps in the design of the
Does the
project.
construction manager, manager agent, have any responsibility for ensuring that the building is built as it should? I know that's primarily the architect's responsibility and the general contractors.
Yes.
But isn't that what we hire a
So-
manager for?
So a construction manager their job is they have to observe and report. Okay, so number one. So they've got to observe, they have to report, they have to observe the formalities of your contract. But in truth, if there's a design defect, that's going to be on the architect. If there's a construction defect, that's going to be on the contractor. And so the construction defect is almost going to be, every time and by definition in most contracts, it's when the contractor doesn't build it in accordance with the plans and specifications. If they don't do that, then most contracts are going to say, that's defective work. Now, there is going to be, and you will get pressure later on, by the way, from architects, from contractors, from maybe even a construction manager, probably not a construction manager. But as you go forward, you're going to discover that maybe you certified a pay application and then something broke that wasn't supposed to break. You discover later on there is a latent defect, something hidden, right, behind the wall that nobody saw. And what's going to happen is the contractor is going to say, well, your construction manager agent approved the pay app, and your architect approved the pay app, so, look at them. The answer to that question, and it's really important that you're solid on this, is to say, no. If you didn't build it in accordance with the plans and specs, it doesn't matter how much viewing the architect did of your work or how much viewing the CM agent did of your work. It doesn't matter. You are responsible for that. Now, the other level of this, they do have duties, right? So let's say they do see, you get a pay application and you get, they certify 100% payment for the sidewalk that's supposed to go around the building, right? And you go out there and you go, there's no sidewalk around the building, but they certified that. Now, if you suffered losses or damages because you paid it and it wasn't done and you relied on them, then that construction manager agent might have responsibility for that. But they're not going to be responsible to build the thing, right? But they might, to the extent that you suffered a loss because of that, that would be their responsibility, their negligence. Yes, ma'am?
Why would they build not to specs or design? Like, what would make them do that if they have specs and designs? Why would they go off and build differently or not according to?
Oftentimes, it's generally not intentional, but sometimes in doing construction, there will be maybe some material that wasn't available at the time to the contractor that they're like, we got to keep going, and so they'll put it in, they won't cover it.
And there's no checks and balances for that? Like, who gets to tell them, wait a minute, don't use that, it's not according to specs or whatever? Is there nobody to do that?
Well,
to prevent that from escalating to what you just described?
So the first responsibility would be on the contractor to do it just like the plans and specs. You want it that way, number one, because when everybody's responsible, no one's responsible. And then you get like this finger pointing exercise if you have something like that happen. But the next level would be, let's say somebody did go by, your CM agent went by the project manager and said, whoa, why are you building our foundation out of, fat clay, which is as soon as it gets wet, it's going to explode, right? Why are you doing that, right? Okay, well, that contractor is still 100% responsible for not using the right material. But then let's say the CM agent saw it, they didn't say anything, they read the report, and then your building starts to crack, okay? That would be an area where that CM agent might have responsibility, but you don't want to have that happen. So the idea here is that you try to do, one is you hire the best qualified contractors you can find, right? That's why I say you can make a really great contractor cheaper through negotiation, but you can't make them better and more responsible for negotiation. So like if you're always getting the cheapest contractor ranked number one, that can happen sometimes. So you definitely have to do that. So we do have to rely on them to perform their function. Then there are other tests that occur. So for example, one of the things that gets covered up sometimes is welds. When they go out there and they have to meet certain standards, certain engineering standards, and so they get inspected. Sometimes the contractors will cover those welds up in your system before the inspector comes out there. And in that case, it's the city inspector, right? That's going to say, okay, you need to uncover that so that you can go forward, right? And so we do depend on that public apparatus to keep everything on track. I mean, because code is the big deal, right? We do depend on them, but as far as the duty to construct it like it says on the plans, 100% on the contractor, but the architect and the CM agent can't look the other way, right? They might have their own responsibility under some circumstances, depending on what the damages were, okay? I say be careful about eyes and ears of the district because a lot of times we throw that around sort of colloquially, right? Especially when you develop a sense of trust, and you may, with a project manager or anybody, even your staff. They're the eyes and ears of the district, right? we just have to understand that later on, while that may be true in some ways, later on, those are the kind of words that get used in court to forgive construction defects, right? And I've actually had that scenario happen where a contractor put in the wrong kind of dirt. They said, yeah, but your construction manager was out on site. They saw us putting it down. You said they're your eyes and ears, and that's real compelling for the jury. I can tell you that. That's a real compelling argument. It's like your eyes and ears. So obviously you approved it. You knew. It wasn't a good excuse, but that's what they do say. So be a little bit careful about that. About that with your agent. Now, they provide a builder's eye. What do I mean by that? So while your agent isn't an actual builder, right, they're supposed to look at it like if they were a contractor coming onto this project and say, how would I use your site differently? How, if you know, and a good example I can think of where is, not in this one, but in this method, but in a CM at risk scenario, was where the CM, who would perform the same design phase duties as the CM agent, right? They came in, they said, look, if you turn this building 45 degrees in this direction, we can save $300,000 or $400,000 because of some geological thing within the underneath the surface. And they did. They saved the money. So when they say a builder's eye, they're looking at it from, you know, how do we get the most value to you using the expertise of the architect in their design, but also using the expertise of this agent who's supposed to be thinking about it like a contractor would think about it to save you money. And so basically get you the same thing, but for a cheaper price, right? Or at least to make those recommendations. Okay. All right. So one of the things that for every project if you use the typical kind of contracts, they should give you a written plan, a project management plan to say a program evaluation, you know, what are you building? Is it reasonable? They need to give you a project schedule, okay? And that's every design phase. When do we intend to begin and end that? When do we bid this thing out? When is this project going to be done, right? So at a minimum, those sorts of things. And then they're supposed to give you cost estimates. Now, why are cost estimates important? So think about if you bid out a project, have you ever noticed that when you bid out a project, and assuming there's no collusion that happens, a large project, the contractors tend to come in, you know, within a reasonable margin of each other. You know, if you get a bunch of responses, there's a grouping, right? And the reason is that they're experts at it, right? So they know how much this project is going to cost or how much they're going to need to charge for it because of their skill and ability in analyzing plans and specs. And because if they didn't estimate well, they'd all go broke, right? Because they would constantly come in having losses, right? Or they wouldn't get the job because their estimates were way too high. So they're pretty good at it. So the skill of a construction manager agent should include being able to give you a really good cost estimate based upon the information that they have. Now understand, when you first start out a project, you don't, and let's say you bring the agent on right off the bat, you don't really have a plan yet, right? Because they're gonna help develop that. But they can still give you those sort of reasonable order of magnitude estimates, those big picture like cost per square foot and I know you've gotten them from architects too, but the difference is an agent is supposed to be current and they're supposed to be more accurate, okay, than your architect would be. They're held to a higher standard, okay? All right. So they're going to create a schedule for completion of the project, and then they'll update that schedule, okay, as time goes by, right? Okay. So the milestone dates that they're going to include at a minimum should be, when are you going to have your, start your design of this project, right? So I've got the intermediate approvals of design. Now, folks, you probably have done a lot of projects, but my guess is that you didn't get, from your architects, you probably, if you're like most, if you did, then great, you guys are doing great. But you're supposed to get an estimate and a set of plans and specs, or, such as they are, at every phase, right? And then you're supposed to approve them, or say, go back and fix this and bring it within budget before they move on to the next phase, okay? And so schematic design, do you know what that is? It's just sort of the basic footprint of your building with some of your major systems that you pick, maybe your foundation, your wall system, or something like that. Then so you've got that articulated, so you get a cost estimate there, right? From both your architect and your CM, okay? Don't let them piggyback on each other. You want to get one independent from both, because if they're off, you want them to reconcile. That's what you're paying for, right? Say, why are we differing in our cost estimates here, right? Then, if you approve that, then they start design development. Now, most architects will tell you that's impractical. We kind of do it all at once. Sure you do. But here's the thing. You do it, but you do that at your own risk, because we might not approve what's in your schematic design, and if you went and designed the whole thing, without getting that approval, and we say no, you just got to go back to the drawing board on that. But sometimes they do that. So at the end of schematic design, you should get an estimate from your agent and your architect, approve it, then you go to design development where you add more detail. Maybe you pick some systems. The reason why I emphasize cost estimating so much here is that because in schematic design, let's say you find out that they do the estimate, it's like, hey, we're under budget here. Great. So we can add X to our building, right? Just like we wanted. That's awesome. And so you add X, right? And then so they do the design development with X included, and you get another estimate, and it's like, all right, we're still on board. And because you gave us this estimate, and you pick different systems, maybe something that you've wanted, they do the construction documents phase, right? That's the last phase before you go out to bid. They present that to you and say, all right, we are good to go. And then you go out to bid. Now, if they're no good at cost estimating, your project comes in way over budget, right? So that's why I say, and you've made all of these choices in these early phases, right, that have put you in this predicament now because you're relying on their cost estimating. So it's really important that you check to see if they are good at cost estimating from their history, because you're making decisions. And now, if your project comes back and it's really, really expensive, way over your budget, and their estimates were way off, what are you going to have to do? You have to redesign the project, right? And in construction, time is money, more than anything, right? And a conservative year, like in normal times, it goes up 6% a year. So it's 0.5%. If you got $100 million worth of bond projects, right? Let's say you have one of these $100 million high school, right? You got $500K a month, right? Because you're having to go back and redo it. So you shouldn't have to do that. So you want to make sure that during the design phase, they're real serious about their cost estimates, and don't let them piggyback off of each other, okay? So finally, we want to know, when are we going to bid this thing? That's a big deal right there, because a good construction manager agent is going to know when other school districts are going out and bidding, right? The more competition, or the more projects there are out there, right? The more expensive your project's probably going to be, right? So you want to bid at a time when there's not as much demand for contractors. So a good construction manager agent is going to be able to, they're going to have their eye looking around at other districts and other construction projects, and they're going to say, this would be a good time to go. Because it really does make a difference depending on the time of year when you go out to bid. And then they'll give you, for each one, a proposed date of substantial completion, meaning when can we occupy this building, right? When can we occupy this facility? And so that's what that means, when we can put it to its intended use. And so they'll give you that too. All right? All right. There's supposed to be an expert cost estimator, okay? All right. And I already talked about those things. They're supposed to give you the preliminary cost estimate based on your program. And then at the end of each design phase, they provide a more detailed estimate with supporting data, right? So by the time you get to construction to go out to bid this thing, you should probably be within 2 to 3% on your project because they have an intimate knowledge of everything about your project. They've known it. If a contractor had the kind of knowledge that they have about the project, they'd nail it right on the head, right? And so as you just want to get more and more specific. So the key is avoid surprises, avoid having to rebid. And this slide just emphasizes the point that I'm making. So at every point, have it come to you, approve it or reject it. You may get tired of it, right? And what I tell administrators when I do trainings for them is that, look, the board's eventually going to get tired of it, and they're going to say, no, you handle it. And I'll be honest, I tell them, look, be grandma, and it's Thanksgiving, and you're just going to keep feeding them turkey because they went out and asked for this bond, so this is one of the things that is going to be their legacy, honestly. So get it in front of them, and even if they just don't want to hear about it anymore, just make sure that they at least have the opportunity for it, okay? So if the board doesn't approve the budget or the scope or whatever, then it shouldn't go to the next step, okay? So that's how that's supposed to go. That's the teeth, right? So, I guess beat this dead horse, you know, there's no more horse left anymore. This is just, the estimates have to be more and more detailed, right? And that's what you have a right to expect, okay? So there we go. All right. So value engineering, have you ever heard of that term? Yeah, that happens during the design, not after the bids come back and the project is too expensive. That's called scope reduction, okay? When you've gone and bid out a project and it comes back too high, they're asking you to reduce square footage. They're asking you to reduce the quality of your systems. Value engineering is getting the system that performs as well as any other system, or as another system, but just cheaper in your area, maybe. Because some places may have a lot of materials of one particular kind where you may be able to build that here more cheaply than they could in another locality. During the design phase, the construction manager agent is supposed to point that out to the architect, say, I think you're using too much glass here, right? We can still have walls. I'm not sure they can be made out of glass because it's real expensive right now, and if you keep down that line, we're gonna bust the budget, right? And so let me recommend something else to you. Might hinder the aesthetic or something, but it's just a recommendation. The owner, the district gets to make the final decision on that.
Mr. Hanson, in addition to the design phase being the place to maximize value on materials, is that also the place to maximize value on cost of labor?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If you've got lots and lots of projects going on, right, people are just going to be like, well, I'm not going to do a very competitive bid for this project because I've already got work. I've got plenty of work. I can't handle it. I'll throw in a bid, but it's going to be really, really high. Right, so you want to try and make it so that so that when you're bidding things out, it's quiet in the market, as quiet as possible. I mean, you're a pretty big fish in this market, right? In terms of what you're looking at building, but just also remember that you may be competing with yourself, right? If you bid multiple projects out yourself, right? Those contractors are going to be like, I can't do all those projects, right? So you could actually create your own market, right, and forces to cause the price to go up. So that's one of the things that a good agent would be mindful of, right, is don't defeat yourself. Okay, all right. There you go. How clever. All right. So during the and I've already just talked about that. So they advise on proposed site use and improvement, selection materials, and that sort of thing. That's what they're supposed to do, okay? All right, so, so under the standard contracts, not the responsibility of a construction manager to make sure the plans comply with specific laws, statutes, ordinance, and building code. That's the architect's responsibility, right? So we never want to be in a position where we're saying, if one of these things, you know, if it doesn't comply with code, we might say to our CM agent, if they have an engineer on staff, why didn't you tell us this, right? Why didn't you tell us this? But whose responsibility is it ultimately? It's the designer's responsibility to do that. And then to help you along the way, you are going to have, during your construction process, people who you have to hire to evaluate the plans, right, for code compliance and that sort of thing, okay? So that may be the city, but you also can have your independent code examiners. Look at that, okay? All right. All right. So bidding and negotiations, all right. So an agent's supposed to provide bidding assistance, and that can be helpful, especially if you've got a big influx, right? And say, because your purchasing department is already, you know, they are working at capacity. And so adding an influx of a lot of construction projects is going to be a lot of work, putting together bid packages and things like that. And so an architect plays some role in that. The agent also plays a role in a bit of a unique way from what an architect does, okay? All right. So for a construction manager agent, they're supposed to, sometimes people use an agent to serve the role of this being the sort of your assistants, and a school district might be its own general contractor, where it's hiring all these different contractors itself to different subcontracts. Like the district might be building an elementary school and say, I'm going to save money and not get a general contractor. I'm cutting that middleman out. It's a disaster generally, but in that scenario, the agent is supposed to look at the project manual and make sure that every piece of, when they went out to bid, they got bids back on every piece of it, right? In your scenario, it's really their main responsibility is going to be to coordinate the bids. They're not, you aren't going to be your own general contractor for large construction projects. That is a fool's errand, and you don't want to use that. You don't want to use that agent for that. So what you would be doing is coordinating constructors. You may have some instances where you're doing renovations, phased renovations. So it may be the agent that's scheduling that, right, to make sure that one sequence of work is done before the next one is done, okay? And advising you on when to bid that out, okay? All right. Another thing is they kind of shepherd the bid a little bit. And so they're supposed to develop the bidder's interest in the project and establish bidding schedules, okay? So basically, they would, within the bounds of law, right, as a builder, right, they know, or they should know, the people within the area who might be capable of doing your job. This is typical language that comes from the AIA. There is nothing wrong with having a construction manager say, hey, you should bid on this job or whatever. That's a different thing than giving somebody favor, right? So they're supposed to drum up interest. And the reason that's important is that the more competition you have for your project, the better quality you'll have and the better price you should have. Just understanding just the market. So some of them are good at that. Some of them don't really emphasize that as well. The main thing to remember is that you are always responsible, ultimately, for making sure the bid complies with the law, right? So we don't get to like say, well, you know, they screwed up this bid, or they didn't put notice, or they didn't do the, you know, make the requirements as they should under the law. Ultimately, it does, no matter how you try to hire somebody to do that, we are ultimately responsible for making sure it meets all of our bidding laws. Now, that's one thing, is that if you do hire a CM agent, then you do want to make sure that they are really solid in that department, right? Because they can help you out a lot, right? If they are very knowledgeable about what the law is, if they are just if they are adhere to the law and they have experience with it, particularly for school districts. Okay, so if you hire somebody, it can be for any kind of government entity, but they need to know what the limits are, what the authority is, and how the process is supposed to work. Because you can get in a lot of trouble if your agent starts making purchases and procurements that are not consistent with your board policy or consistent with the law. And both of those things are really important, right? Because ultimately, it does come back to the district. If it turns out it was incorrect, right? You bear the brunt of it, however that turns out. Once the bids come in, the CM is supposed to analyze the bids and make recommendations, right? However, again, they can have a recommendation, but we have to comply with the law, right? So we've got to rank those bids when they come in, right, or those proposals. We don't delegate that out. So generally, the district will have a committee or something like that that does the ranking, and so you can't delegate all of that responsibility out. Okay.
Can they be part of the committee?
They can be part of the committee. They can be part of the committee, but when they are, my recommendation is that since they're private, right, you're public, you have a very deep understanding of the consequences of failing to comply with the law that perhaps a person in private life who doesn't work for a government entity may not fully grasp or understand. So what I would say is, if you do give them a authority within, as a part of the committee, they should get a vote, or in the same, if they're going to rank it all and be included in the calculation, of something of no greater weight than anybody else, okay? And they should sign their sheet so that we can know how they rank the company, right? As should everybody. Whenever you are doing a ranking, make a ranking sheet, it's all public information, and sign it, okay? So that we know whose product it is. It's really important, and because you don't know what people do when they're not here, right? So that's all I'll say about that. I've had, in my career, I've had some situations with people who were acting in good faith mixed in with people who are not acting in good faith. And you need to be able to show what your work is, okay, when that happens, okay? All right, during the construction phase, let's see, all right, almost there. Okay, so during the construction phase, this is probably the most frustrating part, the part that you think of mostly. So we talk, when we talk about a project manager, right, you're thinking, okay, what's all this deal with pre-construction and design? We're thinking of them as out on site, right? And so there is a role for them to play there, right? But remember, they're doing administrative, management, and related services on the project site, right? So scheduling, documenting, and that sort of thing. And there's some specific duties that are very helpful. So they're going to coordinate the activities of the different contractors that are working out there, right? So if you have a general contractor, that general contractor is responsible for all of their subcontractors. But sometimes you will have instances where you will have multiple contractors working at a site that maybe you're contracting with. That would be where they would come in to sort of manage them. But just understand that if you have a contract with that contractor, it's, again, if they fail, if they breach it, it's not going to, they're just going to tell you, oh, they breached their contract, okay? They won't, even when they want to, in their heart of hearts, go and fix something, be responsible for something. Just as a legal concept, they will not legally be responsible for some of the things your contractors do, right? So they're supposed to coordinate contractors, and again, it goes into the scheduling part, right? All right. the construction manager, so you're gonna have multiple projects going on, right? A construction manager is going to really lead a project manager is gonna lead the information campaign to the district, right? And the discussion, and they're going to schedule meetings to talk about every project that they're assigned to, right? And so what's happening, there's specific things within the contracts that cover some of the subject matter of those meetings, but it's enough to know that if you don't have a project manager, generally, that's 100% gonna fall on the architect, right? The architect is the quarterback in that scenario. They don't take a back seat. The architect doesn't take a back seat to the CM agent, right? They're the designer. But when you have a project manager or CM agent, there is a responsibility for them to call and conduct meetings. The architect may do that too, but they do have that responsibility. So they shouldn't, your project manager or CM agent shouldn't just be piggybacking on your architect's meetings, right? They have their own responsibilities, okay? And that's where we talk about if there's problems with the project and that sort of thing, within that context and try to figure out solutions. And also attending those meetings will be the contractors, right? So it's not just us all talking to ourselves. So it'll be contractors and architects, anybody who's responsible. And if it's a general contractor and they're at a specific phase of the project, that construction manager will have the general in there, plus whatever trade contractor happens to be engaged at that time and important to the next phase of the project, right?
Not on this slide, Mr. Hanson, maybe it's on another. Where do change orders fall in this
It
phase
is on
of the
another
work?
slide.
Great,
It
thank
is
you.
on another slide. So, and not too far away either. So, all right, during the course of the project, you're gonna need some soil testing, you're gonna need all that sort of thing. They're supposed to schedule that too, make sure that that's coordinated. And so if you imagine you've got 15 or 20 projects going on, that's gonna be, that's one place where probably district staff, would be at, they could, but, and actually the architect, when you don't have a project manager, the architect that's one of their duties. So, in the standard agreements, okay? All right. They're supposed to monitor the construction cost. Now, if you're doing big projects where you've got you've hired a general contractor, they're gonna build a school for $50 million, okay, that's fine. It's instances where you have lots and lots of little projects that are gonna be done over time. The CM is supposed to keep track of, trends, like we're gonna need to spend this money pretty soon, so we're gonna have to, get with the bond council to sell bonds, or the financial advisor to sell bonds, or we're going to have to, we're running out of money for this thing, right? So you may have some projects that don't have this super defined scope, right? And that's gonna happen, right? Especially when you get to the end, there'll be some things that you really wanted to do with the money. And so that's one place where an agent can be helpful, is to say, oh, okay, well, here's how much money I see us having. We're under budget on this project, and so I think we're gonna be good. And obviously, hopefully you don't have change orders mucking things up, but we'll talk about that more, okay? All right. The construction manager is supposed to maintain the accounting records. Of course, that's in conjunction with the school, right? Because it's public records, right? But they're supposed to help to organize, and they have their own records that they keep. Those are all public information as well, okay? But, all right. The other thing is that a construction manager, under the standard agreements, are supposed to keep daily logs of what's happening on the site, right? Now, how they do that, seems like they'd have to have someone on site to do that. Now, whether or not what capacity they're in, I don't know. But it really is supposed to include, the weather, who's working on the site, how many workers, what equipment was there, what work is accomplished, and what problems were encountered. Now, this seems like a weird detail to put in here for you, but this is where it's all at, okay? This is how, when your project's late, it's gonna show up in here. right? When your contractor is saying, oh, I need 10 more days because blah, 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 this daily log that they keep, that your CM's supposed to keep, is gonna say, well, you didn't send anybody out to the project site for a month, okay? So you're 10 days late, but you are a month late in getting started because I've got the documentation, so maybe you're not getting days for that, right? So this kind of nitty-gritty detail is incredibly valuable to you when you're trying to avoid having problems at the end of the project, okay? That will also allow you, your staff, and them to notice when a contractor is behind schedule. And there are processes within your contracts, your regular construction contracts, that show you how to address that, right? And then there are responses, which are things like the contractor is supposed to come up with a makeup schedule. Like, how do I get back on track, right? So it's really important to have somebody, and that is one of the benefits you can have from a project manager. They're watching to see those Gantt charts. You've seen those charts that have, all these, they should be start here and finish here for each kind of thing, each part of the project. Well, there's a lot, right? And so having somebody to do that can have some value too, right? To say, looks like we're late on our foundation. And if you're late on your foundation, you're probably not going to be done early, okay? Especially here, where you have weather that can, if it was supposed to be done on June 30th, but they didn't send anybody out, and now it's July 15th, and guess what? You just got a tropical storm, and now you're delayed a month because they didn't have anybody out on site. So that's one of those things that getting somebody to stay on top of the contractors and say, you need to get back on track. That helps, okay? All right, and so we're supposed to get monthly progress reports showing on each of the projects. The district will. The administration can share those with the board, and certainly there would be instances where you would highlight certain things that happen. And what I tell districts all the time is, like, you're going to have problems. There are going to be things that happen, right, during the project that did not go the way that you thought. There might be a change order. And as a board, you may have a project that's late, okay? You get, every time you have something like that, you get that architect in there to explain to you what's happening, why this is happening, and the contractor who's responsible for the project in there to talk to you, the board, about it. Because if you don't, you will constantly get wrong information from them. You will repeat that wrong information, and then you become the avatar of incompetence, okay? People blame you when the stadium isn't done as it's supposed to do. So get them in there to do that. So look, there's always a tendency on the part of school districts to want to say, hey, we don't want people to know that we're having this construction problem. No, I'd say that is a exact opposite. What you want people to know is that you identified a problem, and now you are demanding accountability before it gets out of hand, and you get people in there before it becomes a big problem to explain to you how they're going to fix it, okay? That is the function that you want to be able to show people if you're talking about accountability, right? So just resist that sense of embarrassment, because here's the thing. You hired an architect to design a project, right? That was in accordance with the law, in accordance with your wishes. You hired a contractor to do that, right? It is not your fault if either one of them fails, okay? And so it's just really important that you just understand that there's an assigned responsibility, and it cannot be given to somebody else if it's in their contract, okay? All right, so anyhow, we've got all these other parts of the progress reporting. Sorry, I got bogged down on there. Feel like I'm soapboxing it, but sorry. So anyway, I just feel passionately about it. So, all right, so for pay applications, right? So the contract language says based on their observations, right? And so this is the part where I talked about earlier about people saying, well, your CM approved it, so I'm not going to go back and do it. Like a contractor might come to you and say, well, your CM, your architect approved it, and try to blame them if their work didn't comply with the plans and specs. Now, it's okay to be a little irritated by it, but just notice the word observe, right? So in every standard contract, that's going to be generally the responsibility for a pay application, whether it's the architect or the construction manager. And they're supposed to observe, and that means what can you see without doing special testing, without being invasive? What can you see from the ground? When we look around here, if there's any defect that you can see, that's a patent defect, right? Sometimes latent defects happen, as I talked about earlier, they get covered up. And so that's usually the kind of thing that you go, oh my gosh, the roof is leaking now, and we thought it was done, right? So it might be something that was hidden. So please just remember that if the roof is leaking, it's 100% the contractor's fault, okay? If the roof is leaking, because nobody designs a roof that leaks, okay? I'll just say that. 25 years of experience, I will say that. So they didn't build it in accordance with the plans and specs.
Can you say a little more on the observable sort of
Yes.
function of this?
So-
We approve a bid and a contract that calls for material X. For some reason, material Y was delivered. It is not observable, the difference between X and Y. Is there some remediation through which a construction manager agent can identify the difference in those materials?
Well, sometimes that'll come through materials testing, and it'll come through project, the sheets that come along with the products that are, they're supposed to be kept. So when you get something, you know, a certain kind of a product, it comes with a product information sheet. And so sometimes it'll be noticeable. Others, it won't. But the key point here is there is a difference between observation and inspection. Now, you could never like put in your contract that the construction manager or architect will inspect the project before every pay application, because that is a much higher level and much more invasive, right? So observation is generally what you get, but when it does reveal itself later on that there is something that doesn't comply, I'm dealing with this right now, where something was installed that wasn't supposed to be installed, it was the wrong product, right? HVAC is famous for this, right? And so in that instance, they didn't find out till everything was practically done and paid for, right? So now it's a big issue. So that does happen sometimes. It's not that common, but it might, you know, that's one area where having a project manager or a CM agent might help to have that extra set of eyes that, you know, an architect is supposed to look and see too. What is the contractor telling me they're going to put up there? It's called submittals, right? And there's a lot of them. There's a lot of products. So
Thank you.
so, okay. All right. All right. Okay, and so that's these, like I was talking about, submittals. So when a contractor is going to provide something, one of the jobs of the CM agent would be to look and see, does this match the specs, right? Because there's the bidding part that happens, but you don't get as much detail on it. But when it comes time, okay, we're going to put in the HVAC system, then you're going to get the sheets and you're going to be able to compare them to what the specifications are, okay? All right, so the construction managers, I'm sorry, it's just one, and it's not possessive. So, okay, so anyhow, this is standard language, and it just says, and this is in the architect's too, contract too. It says they should, you know, if they approve a certificate of payment, it is not a representation that they've done exhaustive or continuous on-site inspections. Remember that. It's observation, or that they reviewed, you know, how everything was done, that they've gone and looked at every weld or anything like that. So they're supposed to be able to, and this is like this for a reason, to rely on the representations from the contractor that the work has been done. And it's important that you not mix those responsibilities, because if it turns out to be wrong, you know 100% whose legal responsibility it is. failure, okay? But this is very common language. When I was a brand new lawyer starting out, I used to write all sorts of crazy things about like, no, everybody's responsible. But it doesn't take very long to realize that when everybody's responsible, nobody's responsible. Okay? All right. And this language too bothers people. It's the construction manager will look in general if the work is being performed. But of course, if they see something that shows that it's not correct, they have a duty to report that to us, okay? And we can intervene, right? And so they would intervene on our behalf on some level too, okay? All right, so again, just more standard language. Construction manager not responsible for contractor's failure to carry out the work in accordance with the contract documents. It's like that in the architect too, right? In the architect's contract too, okay? But the contractor is responsible for that, okay? And of course, as I talked about earlier, if they see something they don't tell you and it causes you harm in addition to that defect, then they have their own negligence, right? And indeed, the law says that a CM agent has to carry professional liability insurance, not contractor insurance, right? So it is a special kind of professional liability because they are providing a professional service, okay? So they can be professionally negligent, which is important.
What
Okay.
do you,
Oh,
just make sure it's not answering my question. What do you recommend that the board include in a contract? Because as you said, we shouldn't say eyes and ears, but essentially that's what CM is going to do. And if they see something, they should report it, but how do we ensure that they're looking?
Oh, well, so that's the thing. There are, within the sort of standard agreements as modified, you never sign a standard AIA agreement, okay? Just because, one, it doesn't have the things you need to have under Texas law. But you make modifications within the agreement to account, remembering, as a lawyer, right? You think, what does my client want to avoid, right? So you probably have form contracts that you have developed over time because things happen to you and you don't want them to happen again, right? And so a contract being a book of solutions, you try and get ahead of problems like that. So what you want to do is, for example, in a standard architect agreement, it'll say, we'll make visits on a reasonable basis, right, or at reasonable time periods throughout the project, right? And so I might want to say, you will at a minimum visit the site before you approve a pay application to observe the site. You can do that, right? You can say that. And so that's one, if you have a worry, you should convey that to your counsel so that they can either find and see where that's addressed in your document, and if it's not, then to try to address it, or if it might cause some other trouble, to have a discussion with you to see how do we get, are you willing to accept that trouble, right, of the double responsibility? So, because you're the owner, right, you're the school board. It's your money, and your schools, and your kids, right? So that's why. So that document should reflect your concerns, right? Okay, so sometimes, there's just, a project manager is going to facilitate communications between the contractors and the architect. Sometimes they'll say, hey, I don't understand this drawing, right? And so they can facilitate that, okay? All right, so change orders. So construction manager is going to review requests for change orders. If it's determined that a change order is allowed or required because of some unforeseen condition or some reason allowable in the contract, then the CM agent is going to help to try to negotiate the price of that change order, right? To assist in getting them to get their price to a reasonable amount and a scope. And then submit their recommendations. Sometimes they'll say, no, this is not warrant a change order. And in which case they might say, oh, okay, well, we're not going to approve the change order. And then the contractor will be upset, but okay, so that's their function. They look at it, It's just another set of eyes to look and see, does this meet the criteria in your contract that would allow a change order to happen, right? And there are sometimes, they can be necessary, but you try to avoid those. But a CM agent does not approve them. So the only one that can approve a change to the design documents is who? The architect, right? Plus us, right? So, I would never delegate the authority to a construction manager agent to approve change orders. Okay, that would be very risky. It's your money, right? So, all right. And so sometimes when there's disputes, so we think the contractor is late, right? They're not complying with their time. We walked into our building, it's supposed to be done, and it rained last night, and now there's a big puddle of water in the middle, right? So what do? Do we sit on our hands? What do we do? There's provisions in your contract that are kind of like your contractual grievance process. You've got your board policy, FNG, DGBA, and GF. So in the contract, there's a claims process. And so a lot of times, the CM agent will assist you in documenting the problem and giving the official written notice to the contractor, which is very helpful in getting problems resolved early. That's what you need, right? You don't want to wait till they get big, okay? And sometimes a contractor will have a beef with you. They'll think you were supposed to give them a change order for something, so they might file a claim. And again, the CM agent will probably provide you with advice or whatever about, what they're requesting or the reasoning they're giving, and make a recommendation on whether or not to grant it. But ultimately, the board is, and I think in your board policy, you delegated a substantial amount to the superintendent for certain things, is the one that makes the decision on that, based upon, I think, on the amount of it. So, all right. Very good. All right. So let's see. Okay, are you guys still good? All right. So the basics of getting a CM agent, okay? The basics are that, the law says honor before hiring an architect, or, I'm sorry, honor before the selection of a construction manager agent. We have to hire the architect or engineer first for the project, okay? So you can hire somebody to start to give you advice on your projects generally, but before you assign them to a project, you need to have an architect for that project. And really the project manager should not be involved in getting you that architect. You do your own independent RFQ. You find the one that works for you, and then you hire them, and then that agent you assign the agent to that project, okay? All right. The secret of comedy is timing, right? The secret of construction manager agency is timing. You got to do before you assign them to the project, in a work addendum or something like that, you need to make sure you have the design professional done and hired for that project, okay? All right. Okay, so the other thing is that when you do construction manager agency, first thing you're gonna do is I select construction manager agency for the high school, right? Or the elementary school or whatever you're gonna build, okay? So you do that, but then you go, we're gonna need to get a builder. You'll have to do another selection of a method of delivery. And you've delegated that authority to the superintendent on that, though you discussed your wish to have some information about that for each project. So, but that's in your board policy. It's in your board policy CV. CV is where you start, and you can look at all of the law and the local policies, what you have that govern construction. It's different than just regular purchasing. Regular purchasing is in your CH policy. CV is where your construction is, okay? All right. And it gives a different legal policy for each kind of method of delivery, so if you're interested, okay? All right. So before we advertise, we have to select that method of delivery. So we do have to advertise to get a CM agent, right? So, and I think your district would do that, right? There are some districts that make the mistake, they don't advertise, but your district is formal about stuff. So that's just one of the requirements of the law anyway, so it fits hand in hand with whatever your practice is, okay? So you'd say CMA is the delivery method, and then you'd enter that master agreement with them, and then assign them, after you've hired the architect, you'd assign them the individual projects, okay? If you decide later on that you don't want to use CMA for one of the projects, you can just de-designate it later on. Say, we're just going to use competitive seal proposals for that project, or maybe we're going to do something with a job order contract money, or something like that. But you can do that. And then the CM, their fee won't be charged on that project, okay? That won't be within the scope of their job, right? All right. Like I said, CM can't build anything, so you got to get a contractor, right? All right, the nitty-gritty steps for hiring a CM agent. Again, this is for your information. Your purchasing folks are going to, handle all that for you. But it's just kind of reiteration of what I was talking about before. Okay, you have to advertise. Because they're construction services, and that's what's required in 2269 of the government code. Okay, all right. And then we also have to rank them. So when we select a construction manager agent, we have to select them based on their competence and qualifications. Just like we do with an architect, the most qualified based on their demonstrated competence and qualifications. So first you start, it's a two-step process, right? And we rank them just like we rank anybody else, right? The only difference is technically you're not required to publish for architects, but you are required to publish for CM agent because it's covered in 2269, okay? All right. Okay, so, all right, so anyhow, it's a, we're talking about the selection criteria, okay? So the Professional Services Procurement Act, that's what you use to hire architects. It's the same rules apply in selecting a CM agent. First, you select the most highly qualified based on their demonstrated competence and qualifications, and then you attempt to negotiate an agreement with them. If you cannot negotiate a financial terms that meet your requirements, then you end negotiations with them in writing, and you move on to the next one, okay? So you just continue that until you find somebody. So it's not okay in that first part of the discussion to consider pricing, how much they would charge, what's their cost per square foot on their previous projects, that sort of thing, okay? Only thing you can ask about is their qualifications, and after tonight, there's quite a few things that you know to ask about. How good are you at cost estimating? How experienced are you with procurement, with government procurement, that sort of thing, right? And then after that, you can negotiate price, right? So, okay, all right. If you interview them, they take place in open, right? So there's no closed meeting exception for hiring a CM agent, okay? They're not an employee. So, okay, so 1, qualifications, 2, then you can talk about the money. And then you just proceed from there, okay? So, all right, so as I said, you hire them based upon their qualifications, and these are just the ones that are in the law. And again, your purchasing department knows to put all these in there. You give them some weight, but remember, qualifications first, whether it is, whether it's CM agent or contractor, you want the most qualified, ranked number 1. If it turns out you can't afford them, then you're free to go to the next one down the line after you can't reach a deal with them, right? Right. All right. One other important factor, this is new, and I mean, let's just put this in your minds, is that there's been a trend, not necessarily here in the Valley, but in other parts of Texas, where people are trying to sue to invalidate provisions of contracts, like liquidated damages clauses. And so they agree, they're late, when you apply it, then they say, nope, we're not gonna comply with that, and we're gonna sue you and say, you owe us the money anyway, even though we're late. So I think a reasonable response is to ask, have you ever sued a school district to invalidate a contract? And if they say yes, you don't have to give them positive points, you give them minus 100. Because, why would I say this? Well, it's because if you can't trust that they're gonna comply with their agreement, then you probably can't trust a lot about what you're agreeing to, right? So they're lower. If they say no, then they should just get a 0 because you expect people to comply with their contracts, yes? And if they give a false response, you just knock 1,000 points off. All your procurement should be done on a 1,000-point basis, not a 100-point basis. So basically, maybe you even disqualify them if they lie to you. It's really, you're going to see it at some point in time, and it affects you in the worst possible way because there is no government entity for whom timing of the construction project is more important than a school district. You're opening school or you're not, right? And it's really important for you.
So
Okay?
I think, can you expand on the 1,000 points? Because I believe, I don't know if Ms. Williams is here, but our scoring is 100 and
Pretty
one's at
common.
140.
It's super common to be 100.
They're both 100.
It's super common to be 100. I recommend 1,000 points because to avoid ties, number one, right? It's simple. You just add a 0 to everything, right? But sometimes it's just like, you know, a 1-point difference doesn't quite say it. Like when you have, you know, you give, 5 points for experience and somebody's done, 3 projects and somebody's done 70 projects, right? And so like there should be, one was gonna get all 5 points and the others are gonna get 30. And then when you put them all together, it's only like a 2-point difference, right? But as you expand, when you have just a greater range, now you've got like a 30-point difference there and and a 20-point. And so when you're ranking them, it really helps to make it pop what sort of difference there are between them. Plus, there's almost never an opportunity for you to go, I'm going to give this person 3.5 points, right? Have you ever been stuck doing ranking and you're just like, they're about the same, but this one's better, but it's either all or nothing really. So I do strongly recommend going with the 1,000 point. It helps to prevent ties. It just makes it more clear about who you're going to negotiate with first, and just that's it. That's what I'm sticking with. That's what I've been telling people to do for a while. So, okay, and it seems to work out all right. And all you have to do is add a 0.
We may want to, Superintendent, we want to consider doing that.
Okay.
Okay. So, all right. So, sorry. So sometimes you may have the administration rank. You might look at something as a board and say, I don't agree with that ranking. That number 1's real problematic for me. The question is, can you just say, let's go to number 2? The answer is no. There needs to be a re-ranking. It could be that you have information that maybe the committee didn't have. So a couple of things can happen. If you see something like that, say, I'd like you, it's got to be public, right? And a good reason. It's like, I'd like you to reconsider this because they're saying they've never been sued, but I know 3 different lawsuits they've been involved in. Could you take a look at that, right? And maybe they didn't disclose it. And so the most appropriate thing to do in that circumstance would be the administration say, okay, we'll go ahead and we'll take it. We'll consider, we'll get you the information back. And if it does turn out that they didn't disclose something, that might affect the number of points that they got for a certain thing. And then the ranking may come back different, okay? So it just has to be organic in how you rank them number 1. So we can never just go to number 2.
Can I ask it has been suggested at times that the board should, especially with the larger projects, maybe interview the top 3 ranked firms.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
what's the point of us interviewing if we need to re-rank?
Well, no. So it depends. You incorporate that somehow into the point system. Okay. So are you talking about architects or contractors or just anything in particular?
Anything, like
Yeah.
some of the bigger projects. Like, for
Right.
example, nothing to do with the bond. We interviewed the TPA, the third-party administrators for the health plan, because that's a big deal.
Right. And so basically what you do is you do your own, you can if the administration has its ranking, that's fine. And you want to merge the points, you can do it like that, where basically you guys do your own ranking with your own ranking sheets. You write down your numbers, you average them together, you do the calculation, and you come up with a number. But you need to do that in advance. So if you're going to give points for interview, just how their presentation was, if you're going to do that, then you need to say that in the request for proposals, right? And usually they do. They'd say, we may select you for interview. And that interview, sometimes, it may reveal things like that perhaps weren't known at the time the original ranking was done. And so if it's the administration's job to do the ranking, that may give, you may say, okay, well, we're going to hang on and not do the ranking tonight. We're going to take that information under advisement, go research it, look into it, and see if that affects any of the points from any of the people on the committee. Sometimes boards also will reserve a certain amount of points that they will add based upon their own ranking sheets, right? And so it's all just, you can structure it like that. So yeah, interviews can come in, but you just want to be formal about it, and you just want it, to be, everything you do in procurement, you want it to be repeated. The same thing you've done every time. And if you do make a change, you want to make it so that you do that every time thereafter, right? So it never looks like there's just one unique exception, right, that you're doing. So you just want to be boring, right, which is sort of my expertise, right, be boring. So, okay. All right. So do you want to go into the step-by-step, or are you done with construction procurement tonight? I mean, really, it's just, this is how it goes. And your administration is taking care of all of this stuff. So in step 3, you've delegated the authority to the superintendent to do that. So they'll select a delivery method. You may need to delegate authority to the superintendent to go ahead and solicit the contracts. So if you're doing CSPs at some point in time, competitive proposals, you'll say, I'm delegating you the authority to go out and solicit proposals and to rank them, and then to maybe even negotiate a contract or sign it. Or you can say, we're allowing you to go out for CSPs, but you have to rank them and then bring them back to us for final approval. So it's whatever you want to do, however your delegation goes. And just remember, a delegation is formal. You vote, right? It's either in board policy or you vote somehow to do that, okay? And then you always get that engineer or architect first, okay, for your project. And then you can get that CM agent using an RFQ, request for qualifications, based on their demonstrated competence and qualifications, okay? Right? Cannot hire the CM agent for a project before hiring an engineer or architect to design the project, okay? So it's really important. So that you have somebody assigned to the project before, an architect or engineer assigned to the project before you bring that agent on for that specific project.
Mr. Hanson,
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
in the instance where a district hires a pre-bond architectural firm to help with cost estimates,
Yes.
does that meet that requirement, or are we talking a separate after bond election?
It's a totally different thing. So
Okay, thank you.
if you want if you want to use that architect, right, it kind of depends on what you did in your RFQ. But a lot of times districts will hire the architect pre-bond, and then if the bond passes and the board decides they want them to do that project, they will, go forward with that. It's just, every district does different. But if you were really clear, hey, it's pre-bond, you probably want to do a different RFQ for your architect or engineer, because the key here is that architect or engineer, they weren't hired to design the project, right?
Thank
All
you.
right.
Can you explain, because I'm confused that step 5 would become before step 6. Because my understanding, and then Ms. Garcia, our superintendent, y'all can correct me. My understanding that we were going to look at hiring a manager agent, to handle a big bucket of the projects, and then that manager agent having the expertise would help us select architects and ensure that the contracts we're
Yeah.
entering are protect the district, protect the taxpayers. But you're saying that I.
No, yeah, so we would never have the agent select the architect for the project.
Well, not select
Or-
the district would select the architect, but I'm saying we would
district.
rely, or at least lean on the expertise of the manager agent to help us.
I think that probably, that, you
If
know,
I'm
not
getting this
not a
wrong, that's-
criticism of project managers. I mean, oftentimes they come from the private world too, where some of these laws don't apply. I'm quite sure that many of them are capable of doing that. We just simply have the limit in 2269 that sets the order of when we have to hire one versus
Oh, it's
the
a
other
legal,
to
it's
design
a
the
legal
project.
order.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just, so that's why I say, you could go out and seek general services for possible assignment to projects, but you won't be able to actually, and you could do a master agreement, but you won't actually be able to assign that CM agent to a project until you've already hired an architect for that, to design that project.
So we could enter into agreement, a master agreement with a CM agent without any projects and then assign projects as.
Yes,
They
and
go
the
on? Is
projects
that
may be
what we're
none
looking at?
or all, right?
Now
And
I'm
depending,
confused.
yeah.
Yeah.
Can you clarify
guess
that confusion?
I'm confused as
Mhm.
well. From what I would also, or what I believed was that the program manager or project manager helps with not only scope, but in negotiating fee schedules for these other architects, engineers, et cetera.
No, it's definitely not accommodated by the statute. So I don't have any doubt, listen, in practical, in the real world, I have no doubt that has been the experience of people. They do this sometimes, right? Because sometimes, the reason I emphasized why a project manager is a construction manager agent, because it's construction services, more than 100,000, so it meets the definition. We got to go through 2269. It is one of those things that has sort of existed. Project manager as a thing has existed in its own kind of world, but by definition, they are a CM agent. And so we have to hire them like that. No doubt in my mind that other school districts have hired them and done the very thing that you're talking about, and had them say, hey, help us get the architects, help us get that sort of thing. No doubt in my mind that has happened. But that's partially because there is a practice and a belief in some districts who don't really ask the question about how do you procure them. Because a lot of times they won't even go out and do advertisements. You find out later, okay? So there's no doubt in my mind that it happens just like what you're talking about, but just as a function of the statute, before we hire a CM agent for a project, we have to hire the architect for that project. And that just comes from the language of the statute.
Okay, to clarify that, because we talked about it prior to this meeting. The district can still get a construction manager agent, but not assign architects or engineers. We can do that first. And then later, the district can go out for architects and engineers and
Yeah.
hire them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, but they can't, so they can't get assigned to a project. So
No,
your
no, but-
agent can't
but-
get assigned to a project until you have an architect on that
Right,
project.
but we could have them on board. We just don't assign the project until we get
Yeah, so-
the architect and engineer,
That's
correct?
the idea, is that you do a master agreement, and then as you hire architects or engineers for
We're-
projects,
we're-
then you can do an addendum to the master agreement to add that to the scope of that agent's work.
Okay, got it?
Okay?
Yeah, okay, that's
So,
what,
because, so it'll just be a deliberate thing as you go forward, right? And as you start hiring architects for projects. And it makes sense because the first duties of the agent are to do what? Evaluate your program and work within the design process, right? And so there is a hierarchy, though, that that's observed within the statute. That's all.
we'll follow that hierarchy, but we'll follow.
All right.
One moment. Mr. Ball, anything that you would want to add in terms of your interpretation of Texas Government Code 2269.205?
No, I just think we should put them on retainer.
Thank you.
Okay, so that leads to another question. What is our relationship with Eichelbaum, Wardell, and Hanson? Like, how did this meeting come about?
Well, because it was requested that there was some confusion on project managers, architects, and engineers after our last meeting, where Mr. Trevino was presenting, assigning different architects, engineers to different projects, along with the project manager. And what I got from the board is more clarification on the role of the project manager versus the architect and the engineers. And that's why we know about Mr. Hansen, that he's well-known in this field of construction and project managers and architects and engineers. So we wanted to have this workshop so that the board would have a better understanding of what the process is going to be for us as we proceed moving forward with a project manager or construction manager, along with architects and engineers.
That was my question, just for transparency purposes, to see like if this is someone that already had a relationship or is looking to have a relationship with the district, and how basically the district found them. So.
Yeah, we went looking for someone to come and give us this kind of a presentation too, so that we all know exactly what we need to do, what are the next steps that we need to do with this bond and the projects that we need to be working on in the next coming months.
Okay, I think that's about that. Okay, so the last slides are on each of the delivery methods, and just the basics on these, just so you know, okay? So you have, like I said, get the architect first, and then you get the general contractor, or the construction manager at risk, or the subcontractor, or the construction manager agent, or the design build, and then you get the school. Just that order, okay? That's how we go. Design build, it's a firm that has both the designer and the builder, and you got the architect back there observing during the project, right? Okay? And that's how that goes. Strangely, you do have to get an architect before you get a design build firm to help you to get the design build firm. They make something called a design criteria package for you for your project, and that's how you get them. And then you get your school or whatever kind of facility that you're going to build with them, okay? Main feature of a design build contract, it's a single contract for both the design and construction, but yes, you do have to still have a design professional of your own, okay? All right, so you get your design professional, they do a design criteria package, which is not specifications or plans, it's just criteria that you need for your project. And then during the construction phase, they will advise you about the project. The fee for an architect in that scenario, very low, relatively, just simply because they're not responsible for design, and that's how that goes. Construction manager at risk, that's old Dexter Hammer there. He's got a big old brain, and he's strong, right? Because he's half accountant and he's half contractor, right? And so unlike a CM agent, that's what they do, right? They assist, right? You hire the architect, and then during the design phase, you get Dexter there, and they help you develop the design. And then when it's time to go ahead and build, they're also the builder for that. So that's what a CM at risk does, okay? And so you hire them before you develop plans and specs, because remember all that stuff I talked about with CM agents giving you estimates and all that? That's what these folks are supposed to do, right? And so they do that for your project, and then you can hire them. There's just a couple of different ways to hire them, but basically you go out and advertise, and there you go, all right? So provide pre-construction services like that CM agent does, but during construction phase, they're like a general contractor, except that they're supposed to keep track of all of the costs, because a GMP contract, a guaranteed maximum price contract, is a reimbursement contract, right? So at the end, you do an audit, and you say, how much did you actually spend on this project that's reimbursable? And then that's the most you pay, right? So a GMP is the most you would have to pay based upon their audited books, okay? All right? That's all competitive seal proposals, and that's how you get a general contractor there. And he is that's a general contractor is how, there is no method of delivery called general contractor. So, and that's probably the most common thing that y'all do, is you go out and, design a project, and then you go out and based on some construction documents, you go out and you do a competitive seal proposal, and all the general contractors compete, okay? All right? Big projects, little projects, use them for everything. I think it's superior to competitive bids because the main feature is in CSPs, you get to negotiate the scope and price after the bids come in, okay? And that gives you a really great advantage, right, in negotiation. Competitive bids, you can't negotiate price or scope. So that's why it's usually used for old Clay Cherner there, the dirt work guy, who basically just does smaller types of jobs. We're going to regrade the parking lot. We're going to, regrade the courtyard, that sort of thing. Okay, so you might get your civil engineer there to go ahead and put together the project. And they hire old Clay doing competitive bids, and then they come out and they bring out their steamroller, and that's that. Okay, but much small things, and the main reason you do that is just because it's not well suited for large facilities. So that's it. I'll save you the song.
Is that yours?
Do you want to know? A long time ago, it used to be that the only way to bid was a little CB. It's pretty good for ditches and such, but for building a high school, it ain't worth much. Okay, so that's competitive bidding.
Thank you.
All right, and then that's the job order contracting, and that's what you do to fill the potholes and that sort of thing. So, all right. Thank you very much
On all our presentations.
Please.
for being patient. All right. I hope you have a great, hope you have a holiday tomorrow. Hope you have a great day. But that's job order contracting, and that's me. And thank you very much for having me come. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Hanson, thank you so much. Thank you to the administration. Dr. Quintero, are there any additional questions or comments?
My comment is that the way you ended that was spot on.
Oh, I know. It's hard. I got a whole musical. I mean, it's honestly, you'd be surprised.
Is this available on
and stunned.
YouTube,
You
sir?
missed your calling, sir.
I definitely missed it.
I have
So-
a very.
No, I didn't. I love it.
I have a very important question.
Yes, sir.
The construction manager agent with the bug eyes, is that you or not? I haven't been able to tell this whole time.
Well, let's just
They're
say,
all him.
I've had.
They're all
when I
him.
They're
started-
all you? Okay.
When I started out my career, I had a few issues with some construction manager agents in different parts of the states who were, I just wanted to be clear. They are not the builder. They're just, they're an advisor, right?
But
And
not
so
eyes.
that's all.
Okay,
So yes.
I'll
Yes,
entertain a
but that
motion
is
to
true.
adjourn.
That's me.
so moved.
Second.
I have a motion from trustee Haddad and a second from trustee De La Garza Lopez. We are adjourned at 7:29 PM.